Pulse length can be extremely important and exceptionally useful depending on what you're making. Buttons can output power for 1 or 1.5 seconds, depending on what kind of button you use. For something shorter, you can use a note block and an observer for a 1 redstone tick signal. What if you want something different, though? What if you have something going on in the middle of a contraption and you need the pulse length to change? That's where pulse extenders and shorteners come in. These are fancy things that change how long a pulse lasts. Extenders for making it longer, and shorteners for, believe it or not, making it shorter. In this video, I'll be going over a few ways to make these things as well as how they come in handy by the end. First up is pulse extenders. Like I said, they make pulses last longer, and there are many ways to make one. For example, repeaters can be used as pulse extenders for shorter pulses. When a repeater receives a signal shorter than the delay it's set to, the repeater will naturally extend the pulse to be as long as the delay. This is most useful in combination with observers because observers output a pulse for 1 redstone tick. This short pulse can be useful in some circumstances, such as forcing sticky pistons to spit out their blocks, but it can also be a problem if you're trying to use comparators or redstone torches because the pulse is too short for those two to respond. Using a repeater set to anything more than 1 tick will extend the observer's pulse just a little, but it's just enough to allow these other elements to actually do something. For slightly longer signals, you can use a design making use of comparators passing around a signal, gradually reducing its strength until it peters out. Using a repeater when taking the output is recommended in most cases due to the changing signal strength. This design has some decent customizability though. By changing the number of comparators or how much the signal drops for every loop around the system, you can manipulate how long it stays on for and therefore how much it extends any signal you put in. The way I tend to think about it in a very general way is to divide 15 by the number of signal strength dips, then multiply that result by the number of comparators. This should give you an approximate on how long it'll stay on for. Using the comparator design can get pretty expensive for extensions that need to last a long time, though. For these cases, it can be more helpful and resource efficient to have an input signal turn on a T flip-flop and a timer, and make that timer turn the T flip-flop back off. There are a ton of ways to make a timer, probably worthy of a video all on its own, if anyone would watch that. But a few decent designs are similar to clocks, which I already have a video on, so go check that out. It's also worth noting that this may work incorrectly if you try to put in another input while it's running, so it may be a good idea to prevent signals from being processed while the extender is doing its thing. This can be done by just passing it through a block that can be pushed out of the way with a piston. Now, making signals longer is helpful, but sometimes you have a long signal and you need to make it shorter. In those cases, you can use a pulse shortener, also called a pulse limiter. Generally, these are less customizable in the sense that you can't really change the length of the output signal. This doesn't typically matter a ton, though, because these tend to output signals that last for 1 redstone tick, so you can just use a repeater to get up to 4 ticks and then extend it further if you need to. The first design for these I'm going to show off here is called a circuit breaker and is probably one of the oldest designs for a pulse shortener out there. I remember this thing from the Redstone handbook, and that's from the long forgotten time of 2014 when stained glass was fresh. This works by powering a block and pulling a signal from that using a repeater at the same time as you power a piston to move that block, which will only allow the repeater to see that block for a minimal time and output the shortest pulse it can, being based on the delay that the repeater has set. This design is an old favorite, very simple, very easy. You don't even necessarily need a sticky piston. You can also use an upwards facing piston with a block affected by gravity, like sand or gravel. So it's really cheap and accessible to more early game survival players too. All around, it's a pretty good design. Of course, some people don't like pistons very much. I know I've made jokes like this, but there are legitimately people who don't like pistons, and there are reasons not to. So, there are other designs you can use that are not pistons. One of these makes use of a NOR gate, type of logic gate, to allow a redstone torch to turn on for a limited time before turning it back off. This other design locks the repeater and only unlocks it at the same time it turns off the dust behind it, which means, similar to the circuit breaker from before, the repeater will output its minimum length. These may have some benefits, like working with less delay or being slightly more customizable or taking up less space or something, but the circuit breaker will always be held in my heart. It's I like it. Alternatively, if you simply hate all redstone that doesn't make use of observers, first off, what is wrong with you? Second off, though, you're in luck because you can also make use of this little system. You have an input, toggle the bulb, that changes the comparator. That comparator changing causes the observer to put out one redstone tick pulse, which will be shorter than your input in most cases. The comparator is unfortunately necessary because if you just point the observer at the copper bulb directly, it'll be able to pick up on when the bulb is powered and unpowered, which is visible by the little red dot in the middle that shows up if the bulb is currently receiving power. Now, hearing about all this, you may be thinking to yourself, wow, this is all really great, but when would I ever need to know this stuff? Well, theoretical person who is hopefully watching this video, I have a few scenarios to show some examples of how these ideas can be used. First up is a very simple use case, the humble piston door. What if you want to control how long a door is open for? Buttons don't open it for long enough, but levers keep it open until you specifically turn them off. What you can do here is make the button turn on a pulse extender and make the pulse extender open the door. That way, when the button stops emitting power, the door will still be open for slightly longer because the pulse extender is making your pulse last longer. Apart from that, pulse extenders can also be used to block signals for some amount of time, helping to prevent spamming inputs breaking things. They can also give things time to process more directly, like hoppers or pistons, because those need to take time to do stuff. For one more, a pulse extender can control how long a clock is on for, letting you get a specific number of pulses out of it before it turns off, which is useful in some cases. As for pulse shorteners, they can help make a sticky piston spit out its block, which is actually really handy in a number of ways. I don't have any examples to give, but I'm already in the middle of giving examples why messing with pulse length matters, so chill out. Pulse shorteners are also helpful to control pulse length in general because you can basically just ignore how long the input is going for and just extend the pulse manually if you need something longer. That's all I've got for talking about how to manipulate pulse length here. Hopefully you remember some of these for the next time you're designing a contraption. If you don't design contraptions very often and just like watching other people do redstone, you can hopefully use this to recognize some of these common elements instead, I guess. On another note, I am still very small, and I would like to reach more people with my videos, so if you could help give me some feedback, that would be appreciated. I remember people commenting on my microphone quality on one of my videos a bit back, so I know about that being a point of improvement, but I'm looking for other stuff that I may be able to improve, like titles, thumbnails, whatever. I think I'm gonna try something a little different with the thumbnail for this video, so if any of you theoretical people wanna help, tell me what you think. But apart from that, the classic like and subscribe and comments, and I think there's like a hype thing now, but I don't know what that's about, so do what you want. Whatever you decide to do, though, have fun doing some redstone.